Welcome back, everyone. So this section is all about using TypeScript with Webpack, or Webpack with TypeScript. And I want to make it very clear right up front, this is entirely optional. You don't have to know how to use Webpack to be a TypeScript user. You can use TypeScript in all sorts of situations where you may or may not be using Webpack. So this video and this section has nothing to do with TypeScript syntax, anything unique to TypeScript, other than a couple minor settings will change when we're working with Webpack. So if you have some experience with Webpack, it honestly might be worth just taking a look at the solution code or the end code at the final video in this section instead of watching me build it step by step, because I am also going to explain a little bit about what Webpack does in this video, and then also how to set up Webpack, how to install it, Webpack configuration. And if you have any experience with Webpack, you probably know it can be a bit of a pain. But it also serves a very important purpose. So that's what I want to start with in this video. What is that purpose? Webpack helps us take complicated applications that maybe consist of dozens or hundreds of different files with dependencies where we import and export things and split things into different files and have third-party libraries. It helps take all of that and then creates bundles. It combines them, it compresses them, it shrinks them down into small-ish bundles that we can include. So if a modern website today is a combination of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, with probably a ton more JavaScript than anything else. Here's a really rough chart showing the evolution of the amount of JavaScript over time in applications, or in web apps at least. It's obviously just continued to increase and increase and increase, especially with the rise of single-page apps. We might have a little HTML and a decent amount of CSS, but so much stuff is happening in the client side. It's not a pre-built website anymore for the most part. Instead, the browser is going to have to make tons of requests to go and load maybe 100 different JavaScript files. So when the browser receives our original application, it receives an HTML file or some CSS, maybe one JavaScript file, and then it has to go and make a ton of requests to load pieces of the page, to load more JavaScript, to load libraries. We'll just see tons and tons of HTTP requests if we looked at the network tab of our browser. And each one of those requests takes time. And then eventually we get our full application. So the question is, how do we manage all of this JavaScript? If we have 100 different scripts, how do we load them all? How do we get them all in the right order? Or better yet, how do we bundle them together, make them as small as possible, and have as few requests as possible? We basically have to balance two concerns. On the left side of the scale, we have the fact that every script that we create, every separate script, leads to a new HTTP request in the browser. This can lead to a bottleneck. It can just make things very slow. And then on the other side of the scale, we have the fact that writing code in one massive file is an absolute nightmare. As a developer, it just is a huge headache. So how do we balance those two things? We want to have as few files as possible in the browser that have to load, but we also want as many files as we want when we're actually developing our application. And that is where Webpack comes in. Webpack helps us take a ton of different assets, and we're going to focus on TypeScript, JavaScript files, but it helps you work with Sass, it helps you work with templating languages, it can handle images and SVG, but anyway, it takes all these assets and bundles them together into static assets. So it could take 100 JavaScript files with tons of libraries, combine it down, boil it into some sort of bundled file or files that we can then load as a single script. So that's the basic concept of Webpack. So this section is not really just about Webpack. I have a Webpack YouTube series you could take a look at if you want to learn more about Webpack on its own. But it's about using Webpack with TypeScript. How do we tell Webpack to treat and handle TypeScript files as TypeScript? That is kind of annoying, but honestly, a lot of Webpack is kind of annoying. You configure it, you kind of set it and forget it, but the setting part takes a little bit of practice and a lot of copying and pasting whenever I do it. So that's coming up next.